The ICPO chief is getting tired of Zenigata's excuses, so he assigns Lieutenant Jasmine to work alongside him. She plans this to be her last case before she settles down, and hits it off with Zenigata quite well before telling him he needs to follow her orders to the letter to capture Lupin. The gang are currently diamond hunting in New York. They make short work of the security system thanks to a supply of liquid nitrogen. They then use it on the safe and go to town. While doing so, a man calling himself the Brooklyn Crook gets the drop on them and demands the diamonds for Fujiko's life. Lupin complies and calms Fujiko down by explaining he put a tracker on the bag. They follow the Crook to the mansion of the New York Mafia's boss. The gang watch as the Crook, Stefan, grabs a girl, Maril, and runs with her. It's all an act, of course. The Mafia boss was the chief. By that logic, of course Stefan is Zenigata and Maril Jasmine, though a disguised Jigen doesn't hear them despite managing to track them down while they enjoy a boat ride in Venice. Stefan tells the gang that Maril is blind and dying, asking for their help to fulfill her last wishes. Fujiko and Goemon are moved, but while Lupin and Jigen are leery, they decide, what the hell. The Mafia begins their attack, and Fujiko takes Stefan and Maril away from the shore while the rest of the gang attacks. Jasmine indicates to Zenigata to fake her taking a turn for the worse. Fujiko buys it and the gang rush her to a medical ship. The gang are forced to surrender their weapons upon arriving at the main hospital and end up sealed off. Jasmine and Zenigata reveal the ruse, at the very least earning Lupin's praise for their performance. On top of that, the cage they're in is designed to spring into action if they get close. With Lupin captured, Zenigata and Jasmine enjoy an actual romantic boat ride. They decide to put the story of kissing under a Venice bridge to the test, but it's a low bridge. Meanwhile, Lupin messes around with the cage to try and find a weakness. He borrows Fujiko's bra and sets off the cage again. Hooking it to part of the cage as it's sprung, the gang make use of the entanglement to escape. Meanwhile, Jasmine manages to get a proposal out of Zenigata. Lupin shows up to congratulate them, ruining the moment as Zenigata's far too focused on catching Lupin to ever settle down. This one was a fun episode. It was amusing seeing Zenigata put on a different persona and hearing Goro and I hamming it up. Well, hamming it up in a different way to how Zenigata normally acts anyway. Also nice seeing Lupin's penchant for disguises being used against him for once. At Lamond's estate, a masked man steals a sapphire, leaving Lamond himself dead. Zenigata manages to shoot him down as he escapes. Unfortunately, this turns out to be a decoy that then explodes. It happens. Lupin is named the prime suspect despite Zenigata's objections. The accuser is one Conan Doril, who works with his assistant Pablo as a writer. The next target is said to be Count Johannes, so he decides to prepare by having a fake sapphire worn by his maid, who is disguised as his daughter while the daughter disguises as the maid. Lupin, having learned of this nocturnal mask, infiltrates with Jigen at a party Johannes is throwing. Johannes disguises as Nocturnal Mask himself, with Zenigata keeping watch on the situation. Unfortunately, it's all for naught as Johannes and his daughter are both killed. Doril was left alive but tied up, and Nocturnal Mask appears before the party to taunt everyone before escaping. Lupin and Jigen grab the other ring and escape in the confusion, but discover it's fake. Nocturnal Mask mocks them and they give chase, but he gets away, passing by an unconscious Pablo. The papers continue to blame Lupin, but he has an inkling that the stolen sapphires may be a clue to Nocturnal Mask's identity. Fujiko has acquired Lamond's diary, which reveals he and Johannes knew each other. They, along with two other men, Stan and Dorman, discovered an Inca ruin that housed a massive treasure. The key was in 3 sapphires that unlocked the vault 1,000 years after the owner's death. Unfortunately, at the time of the diary's writing, 1949, it had only been 970 years, so they split the rings and went their separate ways. Stan, however, wanted the rings for himself and ended up falling to his death for them. Lupin suspects that Dorman is either the next target or Nocturnal Mask himself, so he and Jigen head to Dorman's location. Unfortunately, it seems like Nocturnal Mask has beat them to it, killing Doorman. At least until he discovers that the safe only contains a taunting letter from Lupin. Lupin emerges dressed as Nocturnal Mask and they engage in a sword fight. The police arrive as the fight takes the masked men to the roof. Goemon arrives and cuts their masks open, revealing that Nocturnal Mask was Doril. They get knocked down to the police's proximity, where it's revealed that Pablo was also doubling where Doril could not. Jigen reveals himself to be a stand-in for Doorman, and Lupin escapes with the sapphires and decides to try opening the Inca Vault himself, as it's been 1,000 years now. Flamethrower aside, the treasure turns out to be legit. Unfortunately, Fujiko decides to take most of it for herself as they load it away. Decent enough murder mystery, and another example of how Lupin episodes set largely at night tend to look really good. I have to admit, it was at least a little bit surprising that the killer wasn't Stan himself somehow surviving, rather his son. It makes sense that he was at least connected to the whole affair through family, even if that was only revealed at the end at any rate. On a stormy night, a man delivers a package for Lupin. Seeing as both Lupin and Jigen are savvy enough to know what these packages usually contain, they start panicking, but it turns out to just be a doll. Lupin takes a liking to it and decides to retire for the night. He's woken up by a girl's voice, seemingly coming from the doll. It comes to life and leads Lupin outside. Eventually they come across an old building, where the man from before introduces himself as Mephistopheles. He then claims that Lupin is now his puppet, and causes him pain by squeezing his heart that somehow he managed to get. Fortunately, this was all a dream. A news report tells of a diamond known as the Phoenix Tear being stolen the previous night, and strangely enough, Lupin was caught on camera stealing it. He's confused, but also admits to feeling tired despite his sleep. As he inspects the doll, Goemon appears and suggests that it may be a hypnotic puppet. The gang put it to the test that night as Lupin sleeps. Sure enough, Lupin wakes up and follows, but the gang lose sight of him. Fujiko's on the ball though, suspecting that the Dragon Tear diamond will be next. The two diamonds were once owned by Thomas Jakob, a man who was killed alongside his wife by Gestapo that then took them for themselves. The Dragon Tear is currently at a museum, and the police are ready and waiting. Lupin breaks through using a jetpack and a lack of his usual finesse. Zenigata's still left with a decoy though. Lupin trips up as the gang approach, and Goemon uses an ancient samurai technique to wake him up. Mephistopheles appears demanding the diamond, and Fujiko recognises him as Peter, son of Thomas Jakob, who was spared as a baby but holds a grudge against his parents' killers. Peter flees using a smokescreen in the doll as Goemon cuts it. The gang are given an invite to an event at the Berlin Olympic Stadium. Suspecting Peter, they attend, discovering that the other guests are all former Gestapo. Peter begins his show, inflating a giant goat balloon in the middle of the stadium. Lupin spots dynamite tied to it and realises the gas inside will cause a massive explosion. The gang order everyone to evacuate as Lupin confronts Peter. Peter's given up on the diamonds and just wants to cause carnage. Lupin disarms him and shoots the balloon to stakes, with one hitting Peter in the heart. The balloon floats away and Lupin decides to at least honour Peter's family by leaving the two diamonds at their grave. Sort of starts as a bit of a Halloween style episode, which given that it originally aired in June would have been a bit early. Though in this one at least we did get a logical explanation for the weirdness, seeing as it wasn't the actual Mephisto, even if that would be plausible at this point. Fujiko being the one to figure everything out made for a decent change, as given a lot of the gang's heists tend to be based on her information, it makes sense she'd be the one to do so. Fujiko is worried Lupin's getting lazy, as he seems more interested in a statue he recently had made. She points out that the North and South Poles are the wrong way around, meaning the penguins wouldn't have a place to live. Because that's how it works apparently. She also notes that Italy's upside down and coloured red, but Lupin evades that and focuses on the penguin comment, saying he'll just move the penguins to the North Pole and get a Nobel Prize for it. The gang fly out to the South Pole to Jiggin's confusion, as their target, the Pope's crown, is currently in the North Pole. Lupin explains the situation and they goad a group of penguins into coming aboard their airship. Zenigata keeps watch and Fujiko keeps watch over him. Zenigata makes a move on what he thinks is Lupin's tent, but all he gets is a note saying they're headed to the North Pole. This also clues Fujiko in, and she heads to a building that has the same upside down red Italy shape as a logo. The logo's group are known as the Red Travellers, an Italian sect loyal to Mussolini and angry that a French thief like Lupin is laying claim to the Pope's crown. They're currently waiting in the Arctic Ocean as Lupin flies overhead with penguins at the ready. The gang parachute the penguins down to the ground and then begin their search for the site of the crown. The map doesn't seem much use, but Lupin finds the spot anyway, though Zenigata's waiting. On top of that, the Red Traveller's submarine surfaces and fires a missile at them. Fujiko pops her head out to complain that Lupin left her behind, but she's interrupted by the Traveller's continued fire. Unfortunately, the gang can't escape either, as the steering wheel was destroyed in the first strike. Lupin enjoys one last smoke, but notes that it got quiet. They look outside and see that the penguins are giving the group a ton of grief. Their leader remains and fires at them himself. Jiggin and Goemon escape via the blimp, and Lupin is left skidding along the ice. He crashes into the submarine, destroying it and picking up Fujiko. They then crash into an ice cave that is likely the site of the crown. They press forward and find a box, but it turns out to be empty. Zenigata is in pursuit, missing his shoes thanks to the blast from the submarine. In the chase, they knock over another box containing a pair of boots. Said boots somehow mind control Zenigata to declare loyalty to Mussolini. Or possibly be possessed by Mussolini, it's not really clear. Lupin then finds the crown in possession of one of the penguins. Not wanting to lose it, he tries and fails to give chase. Bit of a nonsense episode really, between penguin transport and boots that make you loyal to Mussolini, which I found a bit of an odd non sequitur, especially as it was introduced in the last couple of minutes. Not to mention a bit of a non-ending to it all too. Not that it's the first to freeze frame on an odd point for an ending, it just stands out a bit much here. Next time, a safe guarded by sound, a comic-themed costume party, a time-travelling woman and the gang posing as musicians brings us to episode 92. Until then.